Hey everybody, Gordo and Gary back for episode number 2. This is all about organic growth. You know, Gary wrote an opinion article for CityWire a while back, the dirty little secrets about RIA organic growth, and that's what today's episode is all about. Hey, Gordo and Gary coming with episode 2. We are available on YouTube and all of your podcast favorite listening platforms. So like, subscribe, follow us, engage with us, throw questions at us. This is all for you and for us to have a little bit of fun along the way. But organic growth, it is the topic in the industry right now. If you're an RIA, and unless you're living in a cave or under a rock or just not paying attention to anything, this is the topic at every conference. It's the topic of most articles that are written. It's the topic that we all talk about when we get together. And that is, I believe, organic growth is the oxygen of the financial advisor's business. How do you drive more client engagement? How do you attract prospects? How do you grow client wallet share? How do you shut the back door from attrition and stop terminations and distribution and all the things that are stripping assets away from the firm? Well, one solution is you have a really healthy organic growth rate, and that organic growth rate solves a lot of problems if you're a good grower and you're able to keep that back door closed, people from leaving. So today's episode is all about why organic growth is important. And as I mentioned, my co-host Gary wrote a great article in CityWire. We'll post it to the show notes. And it's all about the dirty little secrets of organic growth. Gary, welcome to the show. Hey.
Thanks, Gordo. I was enjoying listening to you.
Yeah, I love
myself mesmerized. Yeah, it sounds fantastic. It sounds fantastic.
Yeah, you know, the microphone just does amazing things for your voice. So, hey, organic growth.
Yeah.
You know, when I was an advisor, had my own firm, we were good growers. I had a great business partner, and this was, you know, basically 2008 through about early 2014. We were heads down focused on driving organic growth. We knew that was the way to build a great company. And I think of a lot of advisors when they first launched their business, and I left Wall Street with a big wire and started my own independent advisory again with a partner in 2008, but had spent 7 or 8 years in the business leading up to that kind of departure to my own space. And so they really taught me how to attract people and bring them into the firm. And so that was a focus of our RIA. And I think most advisors have that same focus. They're really good at making friends and introducing those friends to the firm and the services they provide. And somewhere along the way, like they forget how to pick up the phone, or they forget how to meet somebody in a coffee shop, or they forget how to tell people who they are and what they do. Why is that so important? Why do we care about organic growth?
Well, let me take a step back, if I may.
Yeah, this is our show. You can do whatever you want.
I can do it. Yeah, and talk about maybe the framework for this. What I wrote about in the CityWire piece, which, by the way, you can find links to it in the show notes or the show summary and our website. And it's actually a couple of pieces. We'll be talking about the second piece in the next episode. But you asked what prompted me to want to write about this, and a couple of things. First, just being in this business for 20 years, more than 20 years of working with RIAs, being in, you know, the acquisition side of the business and then managing businesses in this space. It's been a problem, I think, for the entire time, but it seems like it's a bigger challenge now. And to put some numbers around it, over the last few years, some stats have come out. Various studies come out around organic growth. You know, the custodian benchmarking studies usually include some organic growth figures. I would argue that those are probably not necessarily the most accurate, because it's a self-selected group that responds, I believe, the methodology of the study. So you're going to get people who want to share information, which would tend to tell you it would skew high. But even in
Yeah,
those
because they're
studies,
proud, right? They're
because
proud.
they're willing to share, right? Yeah, they're proud. You're willing to share. Like
Yeah.
if you've got something really bad going on, you probably aren't going to share it. Um, and in those studies, in the last few years, it's tended to be in the 3 to 4% range is sort of the industry organic growth rate. Other studies have put it, closer to 2. And when we hear other serial acquirers talk on podiums and at industry conferences, they tend to say 2 to 3 is what they're seeing on average. And I would say, because we see a lot of firms, 2 to 3 as an average is what we tend to see. But, when 2 to 3 is the average, and I'll define organic growth in a second, but 2 to 3% organic growth as a percentage of AUM, that means the really big growing firms are really skewing that average up. Anyone who remembers maybe we had a little statistics module in a math class in high school. Average, mean versus median. Median is the midpoint. Mean is the average of all of the numbers. So if you've got a handful of really big firms growing in double digits on big bases of assets, they're going to skew that number up, which means that the real median could be zero, could be negative.
Or less, yeah,
And
right.
yeah, I mean, and so what I wanted to write about was kind of why that might be the case. And also I kind of had a thesis, which I, thought was original, was that while the industry cares a lot about it, when you meet with individual advisors, they're not tending to be worried about it. And one of the reasons I give for why the organic growth rates might not be very good is part of why they're not worried about it. But let me talk first about how is organic growth measured?
Well, real quick, before you go there, in your article, you actually reference Chip Rome and a stat that
Mhm.
he threw out at a conference. It's been a couple
Yeah,
years.
it was about a year and a
Um,
half ago. Yeah.
but it's crazy if accurate, which I believe it's accurate, 77% of new flows to the RIA space. So 77 cents of every new dollar to the RIA community is going to just 6% of firms.
Right.
So all that framework you just talked about, that means there's a lot of firms that are in decay, right?
That's right.
They're not even treading water. They're
It-
literally in the distribution phase of their business.
that's right. I mean, it would say that the median firm is shrinking, not growing.
Yeah.
And Chip Rohn, by the way, for those of you listening, CEO of Tiburon Research, you can find his stuff online. He runs a conference, I think, a couple of times a year and issues research reports. So he's a font of information
Yeah.
about the business. So
Now, one thing, real quick, I'm going to ask you a question. So when we talk to advisors, and we talk to lots of advisors, as you mentioned, a lot
mhm,
of them think, okay, hey, my business is growing every year. Look, my revenue went from
right,
3 million to 3.3 million. I grew 10%.
right,
And look, and then the next year it went from 3.3 to 3.7. Look how great I'm doing. Is that
right.
organic growth?
Not necessarily. So organic growth does not include market performance. So for most of the last, we're going on 16 years. This was really like March of 2009 to my recollection when the market really started turning up
Yeah.
from the global financial crisis. It's as we record this, it's March of 2025. It's been 16 years. We have obviously had some volatility at various points, but it's mostly been a straight up market for 16 years. And, that has fueled a lot of the revenue growth and AUM growth inside all of our businesses, right?
Yeah.
And it's good. It's great. Obviously part of the job of financial advisors to be making sure your client is invested appropriately for their goals, their situation. So it's not like it just happened by accident, but it's not organic growth. And you look and listen, if you're just running your business and you're worried about paying the bills and are the revenues going up or down or my expenses going up and down, the market going up and down is going to be a huge influence on that. Where organic growth comes into question is when you want your business to be valued in some way. And as we talked about, I think in the first episode, with the flood of private equity coming into the space, there's a lot more professional investment in RIAs. There's a lot more aggregation and consolidation of RIAs. And to get a premium value, investors are going to look for organic growth, just like you're going to look, as an advisor, and most of you probably aren't advising on individual stocks anymore, but if you were, you're going to you're going to have income stocks. You're going to choose them for a particular reason, but you're going to be looking for growth stocks to provide, some juice to the portfolio, right? And if someone is, if a company is growing like 2-3%, particularly with inflation at, let's say, at least that rate, if not higher, that's not really growth. So that's not going to help you out. So you wouldn't invest in those companies for yourself, for those clients. So why should anyone want to invest in your business, right? So that doesn't mean that they don't, but you're going to be worth more if you're growing more organically. So if market performance isn't organic growth, what is organic growth? Well, it is the net of what I call the 4 levers of organic growth. There's 2 inflows and 2 outflows. And all of you know this from your businesses. So the inflows, the positives, are new assets under management from new clients and contributions, or new additional AUM from existing clients. So those are the positives. And the negatives are withdrawals by existing clients and terminations, people firing you and terminating the relationship and taking their assets elsewhere. And every firm is going to have some number of AUM, some amount of AUM in each of those buckets every year, unless you're a very, very unique business. You're going to have some clients join, you're going to have a few leave. You're going to have, and of course, you're going to have inflows and outflows from existing clients, right? And the net of all of that, whatever that number is, divided by the assets under management that you started, let's say if you're measuring year, that you started the year with, is your percentage AUM growth rate. So if you started the year with 200 million in AUM and you had, 5 million in new clients, 4 million in contributions, 3 million in withdrawals, 2 million in terminations. Don't try and do the math. I'll just tell you it nets to an additional 4 million. Exclude the market. 4 million over 200 is 2%. So you had a 2% organic growth rate.
Okay, everybody. Gary did not do that math in his head.
No, it's in the article, and I was just reading.
Go back to the article, the CityWire article that'll be in the show notes gives that grid. So I know he went through those facts really quickly. I know last week we actually were together and you talked about the 2 up and 2 down. And again, the 2 up are new client AUM.
Yeah.
Client contributions, right? Those are the ups. The downs are client withdrawal and client termination. So if most of your clients are in the RMD phase of life, like you're starting in a hole every year, right?
That's
we
right.
see this in businesses every year where clients are having to take 3, 4, 5% of their account value. You're automatically 3, 4, 5% down. So you've just got to get back to zero.
That's right. And we're going to talk more about that in our next podcast. We're going to talk about the treadmill effect. But today...
It's awful. I hate the treadmill.
We'll get to the treadmill. But why... So my question was, well, everyone agrees organic growth is good. It's great. It's important. It feels good to bring in new business. It feels good to grow revenue. It feels good to grow income. If you're keeping it all yourself, that feels good. If you're sharing it with your team, that feels good because you've decided to do that. If you need to add people, it gives you the ability to add people. A lot of great reasons to grow organically.
Yeah.
Keeps you sharp, keeps you fresh, new blood, right? So why isn't it more of a priority for seemingly the majority of advisors out there? So that's what I attempted to answer in this particular article. So I want to talk a little bit about some of those factors, I think, that are fueling this. So the first one is you only need to be flat to maintain your current income, right? So as you mentioned in sort of the intro to this, advisors, to get to any sort of point of sustainability, they have to build what everyone calls, right, a book of business. So that's organic growth. Like from zero to wherever you get to. That's mostly going to be all organic. You're going to do it however you get there. Referrals, centers of influence. It's friends and family might be the start, but you got to get to a sustainable point somehow. Okay. Then what? So what I think we've observed is, most people reach a point where, they're kind of happy. They're fine. And, there's some people who are never satisfied and they always want to grow and they always want to grow and maybe they don't even know why. But, for a lot of people, once you reach a point where your income is okay, then you start kind of weighing the other factors, which we'll get to in a second. But so this is a unique business in financial services, the financial advisor job itself. Because the financial services industry is famously well compensated, right? We all, people make more money in this space than in a lot of other jobs that you can do, but in a lot of the other sort of jobs in financial services, you reset not to zero necessarily, but you reset to a certain point at the beginning of every year. And I will say, going back 20 years, for the advisors in the RIA space who are all 100% or close to 100% fee-based, this is really prevalent that you start January 1 and plus or minus whatever the market's going to do, plus or minus those terminations and withdrawals, you're starting the year kind of knowing what you're going to make. And, if you have 2 to 3% withdrawal rate and you expect 1 to 2% terminations, and that's kind of your normal rate, then leaving out the market, okay, maybe I need to add, a handful of clients this year to sort of stay level, to keep the boat afloat. But you don't have to start from the beginning. Whereas in a lot of financial services businesses, like, in banking, it's heavily performance based. It's bonus based. You start with you've got to do more deals every year. So if you had a great year in 2024, guess what? You got a big bonus. And then in 2025, you got to do it all over again. Not true for financial advisors. You just have to maintain if you're comfortable where you are. And if you're running a business, you have to maintain if you're comfortable where your team is, where they are. If you feel like, okay, I need to give people 3 to 5% raises, well, okay, you got to find a way to pay for that. But if you're happy, then you kind of just have to, you might ask the question, do I want or need to invest to grow? Or do I just, maintain my current base? And I suspect that that's a lot of what is going on. No one will ever say, yeah, I have no interest in growing. I mean, everyone always says, yeah, I love growth, I want to grow. But when you look at their history, you see that it hasn't happened for most firms in a meaningful way without some help, mostly the market, in a long time. So that is kind of point number one. If you're happy with what you're making, and with the average age of financial advisors being, when I wrote that article, it was around 56. So now it's maybe closer to 57. You're at that point in your life where you're kind of cruising, you're kind of maintaining, you're not retiring yet. But if you're good, you're good. And you're no longer sort of striving for that next level. And so having a lot of advisors in that same phase of life, that's going to have a ripple effect on the industry unless there's people coming in to grow those firms. So that's point number one.
So look, I think you're touching on something that a lot of advisors, they get to an income they love or enjoy, or that provides the life that they want to live. And hey, I'm good. And you kind of just said this, right? But from an advisor's perspective, when I got into this business, right, the manager at the wirehouse that hired me, he said to me in the interview process, look, you're going to work harder than any of your friends for the next 5 years. And then you're done. You don't have to work anymore. This is a business where the slot machine is stuck on pay. If it's fee based, it just keeps coming, right?
Right.
And if the market gives you 4 or 5% a year, and you have younger clients, which is a whole nother topic that we haven't even covered on organic growth. And one of the benefits that it does, it actually should reduce the average age of your client,
Right.
creating a more valuable business, right? And we should get into that in a whole nother
Yeah.
show. But all right, so that was his pitch. His big pitch to me was work your tail off for 5 years, and then you won't work nearly as hard as anybody else you know. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of advisors, they fall into that, right? They'll work really hard to get off the ground, but once the plane's in the air, it's like, just maintain.
Right. I also want to just be clear for everyone listening that we're talking about the why, or some of the reasons
Yeah.
why it might be that organic growth in the RIA business is not very strong. But there's no, if that describes you and you're happy, that's fine.
Great.
Like
Awesome.
it's your life. It is
Yeah.
your business. Like, you get to run it your way. The only consequences are when really you want someone else to value it. So we'll talk about that another time. But
Yeah.
what
Future
I'm what
episode, we'll get into like
right.
how the math behind organic growth to the value of your firm. And
Yeah.
it's punishing. It could be very rewarding or very punishing, but we'll get there later. So look, what growth costs money, Gary.
Right. So that's so like number 2 in this list is, so we have, you only need to be flat to maintain your current income. Okay, so that's a powerful driver of inaction. And then what also stops people from taking action? Well, if you want to grow, you have to invest. It generally doesn't come for free. There's a lot of different ways that you can invest to grow or try and grow. But usually you have to put money in the ground up front to get there. There are some exceptions, but they're not available to everybody. So, like, the custodial referral programs are an exception. You don't have to invest. You have to invest in the infrastructure to be able to handle the inflows, but you pay a fee in perpetuity as opposed to investing up front. So that it's an area people know about. But other than that, or for the most part, you're going to be investing up front. It might be investing in leads, it might be investing in business development or marketing people or new advisors. And so if you hiring a PR firm or a marketing firm, launching a podcast, all those things, even doing your website, those things cost money. And you don't really know what or if the return will be. So again, if you are making 400 grand, let's say, at the end of the day, running an RIA as a senior advisor partner, and you're going to go invest 100,000 in marketing and growth, if you've got one partner, you're each spending 50 grand out of pocket, right? So, after taxes, depending on where you live, that might not be as big of a number, but if you're in one of those no tax states, it might be close to 50 grand. So not quite 50 grand, but anyway, you're going to spend money. So do you really want to do that? Or do you want to sort of circle back to number 1, like, I'm good where I am? It's also true that, and every advisor will say this, new clients are a lot more work than existing clients. So you onboard those new clients, especially if you have a sort of a flood of new clients, or you need to invest time, more resources. So you really need to think about how you're going to do that. And, review meeting number 37 with Mr. and Mrs. Roth or Mr. and Mrs. Gordo, it generally isn't going to have as much in terms of action items coming out of it as, meetings 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, right? So
It's actually why I left the advisory desk, because I couldn't do review number 37 with the Smith family. It just, I could not. Yeah.
Let alone 137, right?
Right. Yeah. It was starting to get mind numbing for me. Now, look, you say growth costs money, and it does. I totally agree. If you really want to be a driver, like an organic growth driver, and you want your business to be, healthy and productive and growing every year, it does cost money, but you can also do it for free. And a lot of advisors fall into this trap, and they will all say it. And I guarantee you, those that are listening will say this too. Well, I built my business on referrals, which is total BS. You might be getting some referrals, but you did not build your business on referrals. It didn't happen. You built your business on your energy and effort towards something every single day. You every single day got up and tried to move something to completion. You tried to move a stranger to a friend status, a friend to a prospect status, a prospect to a client status. You did something every day to move the business forward, and that was free. It was just your time and energy, right? It wasn't actual dollars. It was just time and energy. And most advisors, when they get to that happy state of income, they stop the energy of, putting energy and time towards growing their business. So you're right. You have to now spend the money to have a different flywheel of prospects coming in your direction, and having outsourced providers in many cases, a Smart Asset, a Advisor Finder, a Zoe, all these other programs that are out there and available to advisors to grow. And you're going to spend a lot of money on that. And most advisors give up, right? They say, oh, Smart Asset sent me a whole bunch of bad leads. Well, we love Smart Asset because we have a whole team that their whole job is to drive organic growth for the firm and to follow up on those leads. And if three things I believe have to be true in organic growth. Number one, a war chest, the ability to, what Gary's talking about, spend money, right? The ability to put into your budget that 50,000 he's referencing, or that 100,000, or that 250,000 to drive prospects. So number one, a war chest, cash, the ability to invest. Number two, speed to the prospect. Somebody in your firm who's able to immediately jump, and this costs money, right? It costs money to stand up a team or train an advisor
It's people.
to jump on those prospect opportunities when they do come in. Because guess what? Smart Asset gave that lead to 3 firms, or whatever growth channel you're using. Those prospects may have forgotten that they even filled out a web form 15 minutes ago. I know that happens to me. I filled out apparently something on a BMW dealer's website one day that said I was interested in a BMW, and then they were quickly on the phone with me, and I was like, I didn't fill anything out. I ended up buying a BMW.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was the end result of that?
Yeah, I bought a car. And the third thing is a process to take the prospect through that's consistent and predictable. All this costs money, which is Gary's point in the article, right?
Right. Which then gets to the last point for this discussion, which is maybe the real sort of reason why there hasn't been as much of an emphasis on organic growth in this business for quite a number of years for many advisors. So first is, if you're happy with your current income, all you need to do is maintain it. Second was growth costs money. But the third is growth costs money, ... except when it's free. Because circling back to what we talked about earlier, we've had more or less a bull market for the last 16 years, into last year. The average rate of return of the S&P was a little under 14%, not adjusted for inflation, 11%-ish adjusted for inflation over that time. Last year, through the end of last year, rate was probably higher than that. We're seeing a lot of volatility to start this year. I don't know when you'll be listening to this, so I won't comment on where the market is today. But so if you've been getting somewhere, of course, probably most people are kind of somewhere in that, magical 60-40 allocation land, and, fixed income has done something. But if you've been getting, 60%, let's say, of 11% a year, plus or minus something for fixed income. Sometimes I think it's been minus, depending on what you've invested in. But let's say you've been getting 7 to 10% a year in AUM growth from the markets year after year after year, compounded. Then guess what? You're a genius, right? And you're making more money. Everyone's making more money. Your staff, you've been able to give them increases. You've been able to hire people when you've needed to. You've been able to not worry about inflation, which we didn't really have that much until the last couple of years, but we had a lot in the last couple of years. Yeah, it's been a free lunch, right? So why invest in growth when I'm growing? And when you see firms sort of position to the marketplace. Sometimes their sources of asset flows are clearly broken out and you can really see what's been organic and what's been market. But sometimes it's just kind of like, hey, let's talk about our average, compounded average growth rate on AUM and revenue and not break out the market. And it's it looks like this. It's going straight up, right? Over the last
Yep.
however many years you choose. So why bother investing? So I think that those three things are a lot of the reason why, because I think that maybe some of the thesis when you hear I've heard other people talk about like, oh, organic growth is so low and so anemic in the business and, what's wrong? And so to kind of put a summary on it, like my point of this article was it may not be that something is wrong. It may be a set of sort of very conscious choices or unconscious choices that a lot of advisors are making because their life is good. They're making what they want to make. They're at a point in their lives where they don't really need to shake things up. They just kind of need to keep things, hold steady. It would cost the money in the short run to try and grow more. And because of the markets, they've been growing anyway. So what's the problem? So I think all of those things have added up to where we are today, which is that it is super top heavy in terms of the firms that are growing. You've got some big firms, well-funded, that invest a lot of money in growth, and they are eating up the lion's share of the growth in the industry, and everyone else is kind of just doing whatever they do for the most part. And that's fine until it's not. And our next episode is going to be more about why slow organic growth should worry you, even if everything has been fine all along. And of course, you can think of lots of reasons. And the thing that immediately comes to mind for me is I know there's an old line, it's at least attributed to Warren Buffett. I don't know if he actually said it, but he's been quoted so many times is, I think it's, when the tide goes out, you see who's swimming naked. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit more in the next show, and some other things about why slow organic growth should worry observers of the industry.
When you were just going through that 60-40 portfolio example, I used AI and I said, what has the 60-40 portfolio produced over the last decade? It's magically 6.9%, including the drawdown in 2022. So that's a 10-year trailing annualized rate of return on a basic 60-40 portfolio, meaning you are not a genius or business mastermind if your business has doubled over the last decade, right? It just means the market gave you market-like returns if you were allocated 60-40, and you basically had no organic growth or little organic growth to cover the distribution and termination rate, right? So advisors, they get into a belief and a mental frame where, well, my P&L went up, right? The P part of my P&L, the revenue,
Right.
the top of the funnel is bigger, right? I'm putting more revenue in the top. Well, that's because fee revenue increased because of the market return. But guess what? Your business actually decreased in value as a percentage of that revenue increase. In other words, you can grow your top line, you could be growing your bottom line, but if you're not growing organically, you actually are you're experiencing a negative impact to your business value. And we'll get to that on a future episode. Gary, anything else on organic growth? We could talk for hours and hours about this stuff, and we will over many episodes.
I'll just add to what you just said. So there's lots of little math shortcuts that I've picked up over time that can make you seem like Rain Man when you just know it. So there's one I heard years ago called the rule of 78, which is
72.
7%. Well, there's 78 also, which is 7%.
The one
growth.
I use is 72.
Okay, what's the 72?
Well, you divide your rate of return in the number 72, and that'll give you how many years it takes to double the money.
Well, I think 78 is 8% growth for 7 years doubles, or 7% growth for 8 years doubles.
There's some rules around 70 something.
Yeah, but let's just say it's 6.9% over the last decade. That means, give or take a year or two, everyone's business, if you had zero organic growth during that time, all your inflows and outflows were equal.
Yep.
you would have doubled. Which is exactly why we are where we are.
Awesome. Right? Yeah, your income doubled, likely.
Right. So what happens when it goes the other way? We'll talk about that a little bit next time.
Yeah, it's punishing. So look, if you like what we're talking about and you want to follow us, connect with us. Go to our website, which is Modcast.show, MODCAST.show. Connect with Casey Harrison. She's part of our partnership development team, and you can go there and listen to the podcast, and you can engage with us. You can ask us questions. We'd love to take some questions and put them on the show. And we'd like to say thanks for listening. And if you like this episode, please find us on your favorite podcast app or YouTube. Subscribe, like, share, and we look forward to chatting with you in the future. Hey, Gary, I think this has been fun.
Thanks, everyone.